Hello, America. Let's talk about liberty. My name is Gavin Seim. I'm running for U.S. Congress in Washington's 4th District. But this isn't really about districts. I want to talk briefly today about our liberty and our ability to preserve and protect it and our families. The Second Amendment and our right to keep and bear arms. Now, I get a lot of questions on this, and sometimes from the more liberal folks, they'll say, well, it says in the Second Amendment militia, or there's a comma, or it's old, so we can't expect it to be followed. And I say, shall not be infringed. Now, this means exactly what it says. And so as these questions and challenges continued to come in, I finally went to my website. I did my historical research, and I laid it all out, and I wrote an article, which you can find over at callmegav.com, that talked about the discussions when they were writing and ratifying the Constitution, and how the framers felt and what the intent was, and illustrated what I already knew, that shall not infringe means exactly what it says. You can't have it both ways. You can't infringe or restrict a fundamental right and also say you uphold the Second Amendment. This is the law, and I'm intimately familiar with this Constitution, and so should any that is running for office, and we should challenge them on this. Now, I want to read briefly just a few quotes, if I may, and you can find more of these in the article on my site that I mentioned, but these really brought it home. I ask, who are the militia? They consist now of the whole people except a few public officers. George Mason, June 1788. A militia, when properly formed, are in fact the people themselves. Richard Henry Lee, 1788. To preserve liberty, it is essential that the whole body of the people always possess arms and be taught alike, especially when young, how to use them. Richard Henry Lee, 1788. You see, we had just come out of a bloody revolution, and we had bought our liberty with blood. And we paid for it. And there was no way, as they were framing this great nation and writing this Constitution, that they were going to allow those to be restricted. The British had already tried that. And restricting our weapons was not on the table. Shall not be infringed meant exactly, and still does mean exactly, what it says. And we need to hold our representatives to that. Now, we're seeing more and more infringement or interpretation or twisting. What it really is lawlessness. Because when you violate a fundamental right, when the government tramples on that right, that is not law, that is criminal. We need to get legal. Now, last week I saw this story of this gun store, Aries Armor. And the Bureau of Tobacco and Firearms wanted the names of people who had purchased this part. It was an 80% lower for an AR-style rifle, and they wanted these names. And rightly so, Aries Armor said, no, you can't have them. And they got a restraining order against the ATF. So this federal agency, they worked their way around that, and they went to another judge, and they got a warrant. They raided the store. They took some $300,000 worth of merchandise, and they stole the computers and the data from this store and walked away with it. And I called the owner of the store personally to verify and talk about this and make sure I was understanding what went down correctly. And I spoke with Dimitri, and I was saddened but not astounded, because we continually see this sort of lawlessness from government, and we must put a stop to it. Now, we see multiple counts of lawlessness here. See, the Federal Bureau of Tobacco and Firearms is lawless in that they exist. It is not within the federal government's power to have such an agency. Now, they're not lawless simply because I disdain them. This Constitution is the law for federal government. And in Article 1, Section 8, it says, here's what you are allowed to administrate. And then further in the 10th Amendment, it says, in this Constitution is what the federal government is allowed to do, and anything not in this Constitution is reserved to the people and the states. So as an agency, the ATF should not exist. Lawlessness. And I will not support an agency that behaves in such a tyrannical fashion when I'm in Congress. But then it's also lawless on the Second Amendment front, which applies all the way across. Any government agency shall not be infringed. Yes, this means no permits, no background checks. It means the government does not have the right to touch that right. Shall not be infringed. Now people will say, well, this is terrible. What will happen? What would happen is liberty. We need the government to get legal, and we need to stop tolerating lawlessness. And if you don't like guns or your neighbor doesn't like guns, that's fine, but they do not have the right to steal the liberty of you, to steal your fundamental right to protect your family because they're scared. Those who would give up essential liberty for temporary safety deserve neither, as Benjamin Franklin taught us. So what does this come down to? We have lawlessness in government. What do? This is our responsibility, we the people. It's our responsibility to know who is representing us. You see, the representatives in government are the fry cooks, and we are the masters, we the people. And if we have representatives at any level that are not representing that, it is our responsibility to research that, to know what our representatives are doing, and to remove them from office and replace them with someone who will represent us. And the framers fully intended us to be the sentinels of that liberty. As I talked with Dimitri and heard this story, I thought, where was the local government? Where was the sheriff who is supposed to be that final line of defense against such tyranny? Where were the state and federal representatives for this district and this state standing up and saying, this should not be tolerated? You see, it's our job to make sure that we are only putting people in office who uphold the law. And we can all have opinions and approaches, and maybe we don't want a gun on our shelf. But our rights and our liberty matter, and these are fundamental. You need to go out and you need to find people who will represent you. Maybe you need to run yourself. Maybe you need to support a candidate, volunteer, contribute. Candidates like me need people in support. All over America, there are people who are willing to stand up and represent our liberty and to be lawful in government. We have to rein in our government at every level, and we have to uphold those fundamental liberties. So consider what you're doing, look into your representatives, and find out how you can help and which ones need to be replaced. And if a representative does not uphold the law, they are lawless, they must be removed, and we must uphold that liberty. I'm Gavin Seim. You can find me at callmegav.com. No more politicians. It's time to take America back.